Hey everyone, Civi here. Welcome to the first episode of Vipertech Talk, where I plan to discuss everything about Vipertech rifles, from improvement tutorials to correcting faulty information that has been circulating amongst the community. Today, I'm here to talk about 6 things you should consider when preparing to purchase your first Vipertech rifle. Before we dive into these categories, I would like to mention that these are general questions regarding Vipertechs, and to prevent this video from dragging on, I will not be going too in-depth in answering these questions. Many specifics will be answered in later videos, so please do stay tuned if the answer you're looking for is not addressed today. With that being said, let's get right into it. Question 1. What mags can I use in my VT? This is a question I hear asked very often, and I will go ahead and very briefly answer that question here. I will split the magazines into 2 different categories, without significant modification and with modification. The first category of magazines that do not require significant modifications are VT mags, EPTech mags, GNP magazines, and ProWin Western Arm style magazines. These magazines are plug and play and should function without error in your VT rifle. Do keep in mind, minor modifications to improve fitment and gas router seal may still be needed for these magazines. On the other hand, magazines that require breaking in and/or modification are GHK mags. Polymer GHK G mags simply need to be broken in to fit, but Polymer G5 mags will require some filing. GHK Stanags are a coin toss. Some will fit without modification, and some will require significant grinding. For all GHK magazines, the gas router is made of a softer silicone rubber and is prone to tearing, so you may need to shave it down ever so slightly to relieve the stress put on the router by the nozzle. Depending on your VT rifle pattern, some magazines may not have a follower spring strong enough to actuate the bolt catch. This can be remedied by tuning the bolt catch spring and detent on the rifle. I will cover the specifics of magazine modifications in a future tutorial. Question 2. What is the difference between the 16mm and 18mm carrier? Which should I get? This is a fun question I get all the time. People hear about 2 different carrier options that VT offers, and they aren't sure which to get. Since the 18mm carrier has not been around as long, there is generally less experience with it, and even less documentation. As such, I will discuss the differences here briefly. Firstly, the measurement 16 or 18mm refers to the outer diameter of the nozzle. The carrier that is referred to as the 16mm is the standard original carrier that most VTs come with, dating back to 2010. Functionally, newer carriers are identical to the older iterations, but the quality has gone up as VT continues to improve their manufacturing and design process. The 18mm carrier is a relatively new design, with a larger nozzle diameter first seen in 2017. The primary distinction between the two is felt recoil. With a larger bore, the 18mm carrier has a larger volume of gas and surface area to cycle the carrier. In addition, with a larger bore, VT have allowed for 2 weights to be screwed into the back of the carrier. The combination of the weights and larger bore give the 18mm a significantly greater recoil impulse than its 16mm counterpart. Of course, this comes at a cost. Gas consumption goes up, leading to fewer shots per gram of gas. As a result of the increased gas consumption, the 18mm is also more susceptible to cooldown, especially on full auto. The 18mm carrier comes standard on the VT416, while for any other rifle, it can be obtained as an upgrade for an additional cost. In addition to the increased gas consumption, the 18mm cannot run CO2 magazines. With the increased bore size, material was removed from the walls of the carrier. As a result, running CO2 on an 18mm carrier can potentially bulge your carrier and permanently damage it. The 16mm carrier has thicker walls, and as such, can run CO2 without any issues. This is information that has been provided to us directly from Vipertech, who have tested their own carrier with CO2 cartridge magazines. If you run CO2 in any form on an 18mm, you are doing so at your own risk, with the possibility of damaging your rifle or, in the worst possible case scenario, injuring yourself. My personal take on the matter: VT has stated in no uncertain terms to not use CO2 with the 18mm carrier, and I feel no need to challenge them on the matter. I have two 18mm carriers that I run on propane, and I love them to bits. With that being said, the question remains: which one should you buy? If you live in a place that tends to get cold, you can pick up the 16mm and run CO2. If you live in a warm place and you like having strong recoil, you can consider grabbing the 18mm. Question 3. How do I adjust the FPS? As of the making of this video, there are no adjustable nozzles for the VT system. However, you can order high, standard, 1 joule, and low power nozzles from VT. In addition, if you are making an order directly from VT, they can help tune the nozzle to a specified FPS using your chosen BB weight. If you want different FPS for CQB and field, I recommend getting multiple nozzles, or if you have the extra dough, grab an entire spare carrier. Question 4. What spare parts should I look to get with my rifle? Truth be told, you don't really need much. VT internals are nearly invincible if handled correctly, and not many things should need replacing aside from O-rings and E-clips. The only real consumable that you may want to consider is nozzle guides, especially if you're running CO2, as CO2 is known to wear down the nozzle guides, while on propane the guides don't get worn down at all. In addition, I also suggest nabbing a soft hammer spring if you plan on running your rifle in cold weather on propane, as well as extra hammer and trigger pins, as those have been reported to shear seemingly at random. Alternatively, you can opt to get anti-rotation pins from VT, which have no reports of shearing. O-rings and E-clips can be picked up online. If you live in the States, McMaster-Carr is a one-stop shop for consumable parts like these. Question number 5. Are Vipertech rifles perfect out of the box? The short answer is that they are very close, but not perfect. Some people buy a new VT and think that, from the amount they have paid, that their rifle should be able to reach out to 300 feet in 40-degree weather on duster gas. Obviously, this isn't the case. Whether you are talking performance or operation, VTs may not work exactly how you want when you first receive them. This is not to say that they are inferior or do not work out of the box. VTs work wonderfully fully stock, and more often than not, the tuning required is significantly less than what you may experience with other brands of GBBR. The natural follow-up question is, what am I paying for then? The answer is the closest you can get to a real rifle with unparalleled material quality and an incredibly efficient gas system. Let's talk build quality first. Vipertech rifles are built with oil-quenched SAE 1050 carbon steel internals and a forged 6061-T6 aluminum receiver set, Type 3 mil-spec anodized as the base option. In addition, the rails that come stock with VTs are made from 6061-T6 extruded and CNC'd aluminum, something that isn't really found on stock airsoft guns. While a VT may cost $200 to $300 more than any other rifle stock, if you were to take those rifles and upgrade them from their cast bodies to forged aluminum aftermarket ones, you're already at the cost of a VT and still don't have the internals or the rest of the externals upgraded. While other brands' internals may last a long time, none will last as long as those in a Vipertech. The stock internals and externals of a VT are on par, if not superior to, low to mid-end real AR manufacturer quality. And if you are ordering a full rifle, they come factory assembled and tested for fit and function. Next up is the gas system. The Vipertech gas system is simple. By having a robust design, VT have developed a system that can cycle a full steel carrier, aluminum nozzle, and a combination of hammer, trigger, and buffer springs that very closely replicates a real AR shooting experience. VT springs are some of the stiffest on the market, and the combination of stock hammer and trigger springs makes for a heavier pull than what is commonly found in airsoft, comparable to that of a real AR trigger. If you were to try and replicate this kind of trigger experience in other GBBRs, the gas consumption would have to go up considerably to compensate for the stronger springs. VTs are designed with these features in mind, so despite the heavy springs, they are tuned to still have a very high shot per gram count. For example, a stock VT can crank out 90 or more shots with lockback on propane. However, VTs are tuned to work reliably and consistently in warmer climates. They are designed to utilize the minimum amount of gas required to cycle the carrier. In short, gas consumption is delicately balanced in order to minimize waste. This means under colder temperatures, there may not be enough gas to cycle the carrier reliably. Just as with any other GBBR, however, this can be mitigated by switching to CO2 or utilizing softer springs in the fire control group or buffer assembly. A properly tuned VT can run at temperatures as low as 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius with full lockback capabilities on propane. Alternatively, you can simply put hand warmers in your mag pouches or attach them to your magazines directly. Even if you don't run a VT, this is one trick that can keep your GBBR shooting nice and crisp even in the cold. Question 6. Should I buy a Vipertech? Let us summarize briefly. While the initial cost of a VT may seem higher when compared to other offerings from companies that make gas blowback rifles, there is simply no comparison when it comes to getting an airsoft rifle that so closely resembles the real thing. Stories of poor efficiency and bad QC are honestly just bad information being circulated by individuals who have not handled VTs or have parroted word of mouth over and over. This is something I hope to eliminate with this new series of Vipertech talks, but I digress. Should you buy a Vipertech? Well, let me put it this way. There is nothing a Vipertech can do that any other GBBR cannot. You do not need a Vipertech to have a usable GBBR, much less to go play airsoft with. However, a person who is looking to buy a VT is someone who does not compromise on quality, realism, and performance. If you have the means of purchasing one and do not want to settle for anything less than the absolute best, then yes, you should absolutely get a Vipertech. Thank you all for tuning in for today's episode of Vipertech Talk, and I'll see you all in the next one.